thank you very much, Hattie, and welcome everyone to this very special live recording of Food Rebels here in the Fortnum & Mason's Food and Drink studio. We're really excited to be here. And as Hattie just said, this is rounding off a whole season of Rebels and Misfits, which is the perfect collab for Food Rebels, where we really delight in people who have really challenged the status quo, who are doing things really differently. And we've got a really lovely panel of guests here this evening. I've written a little thing for you all. So Liz Darran, Chief Brand and Creative Officer at Fortnum & Mason, the person responsible for bringing modern creativity into one of the UK's most iconic heritage brands.
Thank you.
Laurie Fermor, founder of Freddie's Farm, a challenger snack brand that's on a mission to get real fruit and veg into kids in the most fun and healthy way possible. And Ivo Devereux from Sapling Spirits, not just award-winning vodka and gin, but planting trees and reducing waste while they do it. So give everyone a round of applause. So I wanted to start on the theme of challenger brands, rebels and misfits. I mean, lots of people say they're challenger brands, but aren't really challenger brands. They're just a brand that's doing something slightly differently. You've got to be really strategically disruptive. There's a lot of different brands out there that have done that kind of thing, but I wanted to talk more about this word of misfit and of rebel. A misfit being a brand that has literally pulled you into a category that maybe you were never in before. Something like Pip and Nut, or, pulling people into nut butters when they maybe didn't have them before, or Tenzing, pulling people into energy drinks when they'd never touch a Red Bull. Whereas a rebel brand is a disruptor with attitude. We're thinking like Brewdog, where they really challenge status quo, or this, the vegan meat brand. Ivo, would you say that you are, as Sapling Spirits, a rebel or a misfit?
Good question. I think I would say that Sapling is a rebel brand. And the reason I say that is based on the description that you just gave, rather than kind of bringing people into to vodka, as it's obviously a big category, we are very much a challenger brand, right? It's incredibly competitive space filled with massive conglomerate companies, and then there are quite a few, due to there being quite low barriers to entry, quite a few kind of independent brands as well. But we have, I'd like to think, done it in quite a different way. Vodka, right, is typically associated with kind of boom, loud clubs and the party scene, and has been marketed really on either it's as cheap as it can possibly get, or it's kind of a status piece and it's a Belvedere and it's a Grey Goose and it's sold in clubs. And we'd like to think that we're really challenging the way people drink vodka, because actually Sapling is all about drinking in a kind of slower, more considered moment at the kind of evening, dinner time. And it's obviously all about sustainability, which historically has not been associated with vodka as well. So yeah, very much a rebel trying to come in and kind of shake up what people typically think of as vodka.
Amazing. And Laurie, at Freddie's Farm, are you a rebel or a misfit brand?
Well, I think we are definitely rebels as well. We are a challenger brand, but we're really trying to clean up the children's snacking aisle. I mean, we could not be more different to what is out there on the shelves. So we make a dried fruit snack for kids. And you think, well, what's new about dried fruit snacks for kids? What we do, we are the only ones on shelves that are made in Britain, using British produce, first of all, which is shocking, especially when it's for children. And we feel that when we're feeding the next generation, we want to do this in a really sustainable way and look after the planet for them. We've also patented a new sort of method for manufacturing our snacks as well, which keeps free sugars lower. And there's been loads about that in the press at the moment. And we do it all, again, sustainably and packing it into paper packets. So we're the only kids snack that's not ultra-processed and completely curbside recyclable. And there's nobody out there doing what we're doing. And it is a challenge, but it's one that we're really up for.
And it seems really extraordinary that no one's been doing either of these things beforehand, now that they exist and they're being done so brilliantly. Liz, at Fortnum & Mason, this is this beautiful heritage, iconic store. It's it's all about tradition. It's about doing things beautifully. How have you woven in this rebellious side into the brand?
Yeah, it's really interesting for us to think about that, because a lot of people would think about us as a an establishment brand, I suppose. And I think we're an establishment brand that's been around for 318 years, and therefore we've probably reimagined ourselves a few times over that period. So if you look at our kind of history, look at the DNA of the brand, innovation has always been a part of it, and we have had to kind of reimagine our offering so many times. So I think for me, we're definitely, there is a strain of rebelliousness in us, although it wouldn't kind of, sometimes you wouldn't know that from the outside. And I also think just in food and drink in general, it's such, it's a category with so much self-expression and so much creativity that to be a rebel in that space is quite a high bar, actually. So I think it's all about the kind of gentle rebelliousness at Fortnum's and making sure that we're always kind of looking inwards and testing ourselves and trying to make sure that we are relevant and reinventing ourselves for people.
Yeah, so there's this sort of innovation side to this rebelliousness that's about movement and constantly changing.
Yeah.
At Sapling Spirits, you've really challenged that traditional perception of spirits, like you're saying, the way people are drinking, and it's totally changed. What inspired you to challenge this?
Well, it's a good question. We've done a podcast together, right? And I've kind of told the story. Should I give the story of how Sapling started? So I'll try and give as concise and kind of short a version as I possibly can. So we really got into this in the first place. It didn't really start with the vodka first. Actually, I set this up with one of my really good friends from school, a guy called Ed. At the time, we were about 22 years old, and we were quite heavily involved in tree planting projects, initially around the world. We kind of used it as a way to
Was this before vodka?
This is way before vodka. This is way before vodka. So I, at the time, was working in the music industry. My business partner, Ed, was working for a craft food and drink brand. Neither of us had ever worked in spirits before. We had done a bit of work in hospitality, but the spirits kind of came more as a conduit to the trees, actually. So we were involved in a tree planting project on a small island off the west coast of Scotland. There'd been a forest fire on this island, and it wiped out about 150,000 trees. And Ed and myself were there. Basically, our kind of main role was trying to get more of the locals in Scotland involved in this tree planting project. And we found out very quickly that when we asked people to just plant trees with us and do this great thing for the planet, naturally they were like, great, but kind of what's in it for us? So why would I bother taking time out of my weekend to come and plant trees with you? And so we realised that we quite quickly had to change the narrative around the project, and we kind of used a bit of my experience and turned it into a tree planting music festival. So it was tree planting in the daytime. We built a cocktail bar. We kind of put together a set of speakers and managed, just by kind of making the tree planting project into a really fun, excitable, enjoyable place to be, we managed to get about 80 of the locals involved. And so we somehow went from a tree planting project into setting up this event, and suddenly we became kind of festival organisers, and we realised we had to do things like set up a bar and get in spirits and beers and that kind of stuff, and we just couldn't find any spirits that we felt aligned with the mission of this music festival, this tree planting event. Like I said at the beginning, they were all sold on the promise of two things. It was all about kind of grandeur and expense, or it was as cheap as it could possibly get. And so we were like, it's crazy. There's definitely a gap here for people that really care about the vodka they're drinking, the story behind it, the people behind it, the way it's made, and something that truly has sustainability kind of intrinsically running through the business and the core of it. And so we decided to start a vodka brand, and because of the tree planting nature, we wanted that to be pretty kind of front and central. And so we plant one tree for every bottle that we sell. So as I say, the tree planting really came first, and the kind of vodka came second. So yeah, that's really kind of why and how it started.
It's incredible, isn't it, to think of it like that. I think if you go back even 10 years, even 20 years, it was always profit first. It was people and planet definitely came far behind that kind of profit. This is a business. This is why we, are running a business. But this has really worked for you guys, hasn't it? Because you're pulling people into your brand on a really emotional level.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. Most brands that have kind of sustainability as part of its story either have that kind of sewn in at some point later on down the line, or they felt like they had to kind of tick a CSR box, whatever it might be. Big part of the reason for our success to date, I think, is the fact that, and I hate the word authentic because it's way overused, but people really feel that the things that we're talking about, things we're doing, are genuine because of the fact that it has started because of the tree planting first. We didn't have a vodka brand and suddenly decide, we need to make it sustainable, and so we should do these things. And so it's been a big reason for our success today, and has meant that we've obviously had these kind of core values that we stick to in the business and we'll never kind of veer away from, which has also been pretty helpful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Laurie's story actually starts with trees as well, but they're apple trees, and you're literally surrounded by apple trees, aren't you, as a business? And at what point was it that you guys decided, where did you come up with the idea for Freddie's Farm?
Well, I mean, it's not nearly as rock and roll as that. I mean, not even close. Well, our company is called Freddie's Farm, and Freddie is my son. We founded it, my husband and I founded it together. So first and foremost, we are Freddie's mummy and daddy. I clearly am not a fourth generation Kentish fruit farmer. He is a fourth generation Kentish fruit farmer, growing a lot of apples in the Garden of England, apples, pears, a lot of soft fruit and everything else as well. He had also been involved since a project at university with ways of preserving and dehydrating fruits and vegetables. And when he finished uni, he thought he would actually like to do this in real life, and went back to the family farm and sort of said, Dad, I'm going to go to the States. And he'd saved up some money, and he bought the first commercial dehydrator in the UK about 14 years ago. And I think his dad must have thought, what are you doing? Just get on a tractor. But that's what he wanted to do. And we white labelled manufactured for a few years for other people, and he was sort of farming alongside that. And then Freddie arrived. And we walked around the supermarkets and looked at what was on the supermarket shelves, and thought, not in a million years would we feed this to our son. Both with the manufacturing knowledge of how the snacks and the food was made, but also with the farming knowledge that where it was coming from. And like I said, so we're the only ones that use British fruits and vegetables. And the majority of children's purees and all the fruit snacks are made of apples. And we have a bounty of apples in the UK. But they're all made with foreign fruit. Now, our biggest competitor that I won't name is made with puree from China that's shipped to South Africa and then packed into these horrible foil plastic packets. And we just thought, no.
Not to mention boiled to a sticky goo.
I mean, it might as well be jam at that point. And we thought, no, we're going to do this differently. And like I said, he patented this process, and we went from there. But I think it's all stemmed from, wanting to do better, not only for our children, but for the nation's children, without that sounding too kind of grandiose. But if we weren't going to feed it to our kids, then we wouldn't want anybody else's to eat that as well. But like you said, it's all come from trees, and we are so fortunate. We live in the middle of an orchard. Our manufacturing site, our factory, Freddie's factory, is in the middle of a 120-year-old orchard, and it's a pretty idyllic place to be. But it goes to show that it can be done, and on a big scale. And if we can do it like this, there's no reason for all these other brands to manufacture in the way they do, especially when it's for children.
I think demand is changing now, isn't it? I think people are becoming far more educated about the food that they're eating than they ever were before, and we're really noticing that. I think, is that, Liz, is that something that you've noticed about your customers over the years? I mean, can you share some insights about the kind of people that come and shop at Fortnum's and how that maybe has changed over the years, or maybe it hasn't?
I think that the people that come to Fortnum's come for really delicious food. And I think there's a sort of an assumption around that we're really, really careful with our sourcing, and that we're curating a really great selection of products. And I think that flows through our thinking. So, the greater the care that we take with our sourcing, the more delicious the taste, and therefore the greater joy we'll bring. And our brand purpose is all about making joy for our customers. So I think that formula works, and I think that's always been the thing that people come to Fortnum's for. And I just want to tell a little story about how we came to be a brand. So I don't know how many people know this, but William Fortnum he was a footman in Queen Anne's royal household in the 1700s. And Hattie, you've definitely heard this story before. And he noticed that Queen Anne wanted to have fresh candles at dinner every night. So being an enterprising young footman, he said, well, can I take the candles that have been burnt down? And he used them and melted them down and created new candles, and he sold them and traded from this site from 1707 with his landlord Hugh Mason. So there's a really beautiful story there about sort of sustainability and recycling being a part of the brand right from the very start, right from the inception of the brand, if you like. And I think that sort of care and that thinking and that sort of, particularly in the sourcing of what we put into our products and the care that we take with how things taste and ultimately the kind of joy that brings to our customers, that's the thing that sort of drives us. And I think customers, I hope, will kind of keep coming back for that.
Absolutely. I've noticed even in the curation of tonight, the attention to detail that's been put into every different element is absolutely exquisite. And I was lucky enough to meet yourself and Hattie at the Food and Drink Awards at the Royal Exchange, where you celebrate some of the best writers from across the whole of the food and drink industry. And the attention to detail is just superb. One of the things that really struck me was how much you guys have been working with influencers, which I wouldn't have necessarily have linked the two, you know, the Fortnum's, the traditional brand, with the kind of modern day, you know, spoken word that people are using.
Yeah, and actually what we try and do is find people who are, again, that word authentic, but authentic kind of fans of Fortnum's, and it's not difficult to find them because this is the first brand I've ever worked for where you sort of say that you work for Fortnum's, and everyone goes, oh my God, I love Fortnum's. So, you know, we try to find authentic voices and people who genuinely are fans of the brand. You know, they buy the brand's products, they have done for years. So it's there is an authenticity to what they're saying about the brand. I think that's super important for us, is that we're not sort of paying off people to say things about our brand. And I think it's genuine. It comes from the heart. And, you know, we give them a great deal of leeway to talk about and to create the content that they want to create, talk about the brand in the way that they want to talk about it. And I think that comes through.
I wanted to go back to this idea of rebellion, you know, to start up a company, to start it up from scratch in your 20s. It's hard work, it's hard graft. You take a huge amount of risks, not just financially, but in all the different ways. What's the boldest, kind of most rebellious move that you've made, and how did it play out?
Good question. I mean, to be honest, I think that the boldest thing we ever did probably was just to set up the business in the first place. I think typically, right, people go through life, their early years going through school thinking at some point they need to go into a pretty steady job and steady career, at least get a number of years kind of experience in either a kind of management consultancy or a law firm, whatever it might be, and just to kind of buck the trend and decide from an early age that rather than go down that route that everyone else goes down and kind of people tell you should go down, picking your own lane and figuring out whether it's going to work after is a pretty bold step. I think, having said that, like you pointed out, we were pretty young when we set up Sapling, so we had the kind of fortitude that we didn't have mortgages and kids and things, so we could take that kind of risk, and if it did all go plummeting down for whatever reason, you know, we could then go down into the more straightforward lane. So I think it was bold, but having said that, it was also probably the best time, I would say, to take that step. And but yeah, so starting the business in the first place rather than going down the kind of normal route into a typical job, I think was the bold step. And thank God we did, because it's been a pretty incredible, exciting journey over the last kind of 6 years. So yeah, I'd say that.
Excellent. And question for Liz about rebellion at Fortnum and Masons. Obviously, you've already said you kind of keep it on the side of innovation rather than rebellion, but I've been really fascinated by this beautiful space, your food and drink studio. And Hattie was telling me earlier that she's going to be having Ibiza club nights in here, and you know, everything from fungi to Ibiza club nights. I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating what you're doing. So can you talk to me a little bit about the thinking behind it? Yeah,
I mean, I think it was again a bold decision. So to give you some context, pre-COVID, this was menswear. So I don't know how many customers we had, but it was menswear. And then it was over COVID, it became an empty space. But it is, it's sort of prime commercial retail. So for a brand to give that up, it's quite a bold move, I think. And also, I think, I don't know, but I think it's probably the first of its kind in a sort of, particularly in a period building like this. But a full production kitchen, broadcast enabled. it took a great deal of work and a great deal of commitment from so many people to be able to turn this space into what it is today. And I think that the other kind of boldness to it was I guess the backing of the programme that we've put in and Hattie runs. And, you know, that is about creating a space for dialogues like this, for more disruption, for more kind of, you know, exploring the edges of the brand and bringing to life those conversations that are happening in food and drink, that are happening all across Fortnum and Mason, but perhaps people don't know are happening here. And bringing in partners and bringing in new communities of people who are interested in food and drink, but perhaps didn't know that Fortnum's conducted these kinds of discussions or these kinds of debates. And so I think it was a really exciting move for the brand. And again, you know, we talked about kind of reinvention at the start, and, you know, in a way it's our own small rebellion of just putting something completely new, completely unexpected, and hopefully original into Fortnum's, right at the very heart of the building as well.
Amazing. Have you ever had any real rebels come in and disrupt things?
I'm sure we have. I mean, yeah, every day, I'm sure. We've had a few. This space it's incredibly flexible, and so you can do a really small kind of intimate, you know, dinner, or you can do a really wild party. So we've definitely had some rebels and misfits through the door.
Brilliant. And Laurie, earlier you mentioned about something that's been in the press a lot, which is kind of the baby food and the children's food, about the real kind of morality behind what has been created by big food and why there's a lot of beautiful artisanal brands like yours doing it a better way. Where do you see that going in future? I mean, what would you like to see in the industry?
I think it's going to keep going, hopefully in the right direction.
Can you just describe a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, what I was going to say was that talking about doing something rebellious, I think the most rebellious thing we have ever done is just sticking to our guns. We started talking about ultra-processed food long before it was a thing in the press. And for a very, very long time, we were just weirdos with apples talking about our patented process. And everybody's going, yeah, that's fine. But we stuck to our guns. And unlike sort of how everybody else is doing it, like we were saying, that it's all purees and concentrates that are then baked. And apologies if everybody knows about free sugars and how they work. But even in fruits and vegetables, there's a bond between sugar and fibre. When you overly process something, whether that's blending it up in a blender, you're literally breaking those bonds. Or if you're cooking things at high temperatures, you're breaking those bonds. And those sugars, even though they're from natural sources, start to behave like added sugars in our bodies and in our children's bodies, which lead to sugar highs, crashes, and if you have a toddler, the last thing you want is a sugar high and a crash, irrespective of the health side effects as well. And so we decided to do it a little bit differently. So rather than starting with a puree or a concentrate, we're the only people that start with whole fruits and vegetables that we roughly chop, grate, before it goes into, for want of a better word, sort of a settling tank. And any juice, any free sugar that's created, we drain away. And currently are selling into a local distillery, actually. Mm-hmm. And they're making vodka with that. So I think it's a little treat for mum on the side of the children. Not for the children. That's for me. And then we dehydrate at really low temperature. So every step of the way, maintaining these bonds between sugar and fibre so that it's a really healthy, natural way of preserving the fruits and vegetables. And so, yeah, we've been doing this for a very long time. And I think we're seeing this in the press with the BBC Panorama programme. I think people are starting to realise just what happens, even though that, yes, these things are made at some point a very long time ago, originally from an apple. Because of what they have done to it, they no longer resemble the fruits or vegetables they start with, and they no longer have the nutrients in there that they once started with. So I think it's going to go in the right direction, and I think parents are becoming, not just parents, but everybody, but especially when it's for their children, are becoming a lot more discerning, which is amazing. And finally everybody's not everybody's catching up with us, but we are no longer in the minority. And I don't think that ultra-processed food is a trend that is going anywhere. I think people are wisening up. They're picking up packets off the shelf and they're looking at the back of them straight away. And they're no longer being sort of fooled by the clever marketing that's there. So, yeah, hopefully it's making our job just that little bit easier.
There's definitely this trend, isn't there, to whole food, really good quality food, good ingredients. To your point earlier, Liz, about sourcing really beautiful ingredients and doing something magic with it. I mean, is that something that you guys, your sourcing is?
Yeah, 100%. So we, much like you've just pointed out there, we are very kind of particular about not only the ingredients we use from a liquid perspective and how it's produced into high quality vodka, but it's a lot about, for example, the distance travel between distillery and farm. So it comes down to the kind of sustainability, and we only ever use fully organic where we can. So all of our, it's a kind of misconception that gin, for example, is made out of juniper. 90% of all spirits are made from their base ingredient that they ferment from. So it's either if it's a rye whiskey, it's a rye, or it's a vodka, it's either wheat or potato, whatever it might be. And so that's really the kind of key thing to look at when you're making either vodka, gin, whiskey, tequila, whatever it might be. And so for us, we use a wheat base, and unlike 90% of the spirits out there, it's fully organic. And we go kind of one step further than that, where we work with fully regenerative farmers as well. So it's not just organic. They actually kind of sow in a multi-layer crop into the wheat farm, up to 4 different kind of species of plant and crop, and then they harvest the wheat over the top of this, so they don't have to till the soil, which releases carbon into the atmosphere. So it's all quite technical, but it's kind of we think the future of farming, and because our kind of mission is to lead on sustainability within the spirits business, naturally we use these kind of ingredients to ferment our base liquid. And when it comes to our botanicals with our gin, it's a similar story in terms of locality, high quality organic ingredients as well.
Amazing. It's just so fascinating to see the amount of depth of thought that is going into all of the sourcing behind things. I mean, Laurie, back to you. Do you think that we're doing enough to encourage kind of schools and parents and everyone really to understand free sugars and understand this whole process?
It's quite... there's a lot of common sense in it, but it's a difficult concept to explain, and it's a hard one to sort of educate people on, and we have to be so careful not to criticise parents and make them feel bad about the choices that they've been making, because it's not their fault. They've understandably believed that what was on the supermarket shelves is safe, is good for their children, otherwise it couldn't possibly be for sale.
Well, you pick up a packet and it says it's high in protein.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, whether it's a child's snack or an adult meal, and it says it's high in protein and it's low in calories, and you're thinking, great, I'm making a really good choice and I'm in a rush and I've just finished my shift, brilliant. And then to be told later, actually, it's really highly processed, it's full of emulsifiers and stabilizers and all these horrible things, and you think, why didn't you say?
And I think so much of it is very complex, and like we said, people are now looking at the back of the packet, and that's super. But now, obviously, what is emerging that kind of we know with sort of in the trade, it's not just the ingredients that go in, it's how they're processed, or rather overlay processed, that then can affect the end product. And how can the ordinary person, the ordinary busy parent, rushing past the supermarket shelf, grasp that quickly while they're making a decision? They've got a child pulling on their trolley, and it is really hard. So I think it's definitely an education piece that needs to be out there, but it has to be the brands themselves that are making this change. It's not the parents' fault. I think it's our job as manufacturers to do better, which is what we are trying to do, and to be as open and transparent as possible, which I think sort of smaller brands like ours can be, whereas the larger brands, they can't show their processes because they are awful, whereas we pride ourselves in being able to fling open the doors to our factory and come and see inside. That's how confident we are in what we do, that we want parents to really have that trust and, like we said, that kind of authenticity, for want of a better word, but they need to be able to trust us because they can't trust the other things out there.
Yeah.
Or, sorry, thought I'd just jump in on this one. Because it's unlikely, right, the brands are going to do it because that's what they've been doing for years. Realistically, it's going to come down to policy change in order for brands to then, because the brands have been making billions for years and years by selling whatever they're selling, and that change is never going to come through them just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, right? So until the government kind of steps in and says you have to do X, Y, and Z, that's never going to change. So I would probably argue that actually it's down to policy change rather than the brand side. But
I completely agree. It's just making sure that it's the right policy change, and I think there's such a push at the moment with HFSS, so high fat, salt and sugar, which is pushing brands to reformulate, which in theory is great, but then they're removing natural sugars and replacing them with artificial ingredients or replacing them with emulsifiers and things to then bring down the overall fat or sugar content. And if anything, we're just going backwards at that point.
Into a more chemically laden food
Exactly.
product.
So I completely agree. It is down to sort of government and policy as well, but it's just making sure that that policy is the right one that is so hard.
Liz, what role do you think Fortnum's can play in kind of shaping the food industry going forwards?
I mean, it goes back a little bit to what I said about approaching this in a way that makes good food a joyful, optimistic thing, not a sort of hair shirt choice. And as I say, we have that kind of formula that goes, if you take real care with the sourcing and the production and the processes, then your food's going to taste more delicious, and therefore you're going to have a more joyful experience as a result. So I hope that we can lend a credible voice to an approach to food and drink, an approach to the food system that is more respectful, more sustainable, but also really joyful and optimistic. And I think when people think of Fortnum's, they often, it's a sort of brand that makes you smile. It's associated with good times and treats and Christmas and all of those lovely things. And so if we can attach that joy and that optimism to carefully curated and chosen food that's good for the planet and good for people, then I think that's something that we'd love to be able to bring.
I love that.
100%. Sorry, were you going to say something on that?
I was just going to say that I think we always feel that we're like kind of killjoys. We're like, you can't have those sweets, you can't have this, you must have the healthy children's snacks. But we just want to bring, like you said, the joy back into food, and parents to be able to say yes to things, because food is supposed to be fun. And it's so hard, I think, as parents, because you kind of, no, don't do that, put that down, sit down, you can't eat that. And you just feel like sort of the monster all the time. And I think, despite my accent, I'm Italian and I grew up in Italy, and food for us is so important, and just sitting around the table and having that wonderful, joyful experience and taking the stress and the worry out of it for people as well. You go into the supermarket now and you go, everything's going to kill me. I don't know what to eat. That joy in eating is so important.
There was one more thing. I think that the other bit of this is storytelling. Just listening to you guys talk about how the brands were created and the thinking that goes into them. And I think very often we have these great stories behind our products, and just in terms of how you can get people to be interested in great food, is actually telling the stories. Who are the suppliers? What are their stories? How long? We've been working with some suppliers for decades, and they have these amazing methods and artisanal processes that you don't often get off the. If you're reading the tin or if you're reading the jar, you don't necessarily hear that whole story. So, we've got a real focus around sort of better storytelling in the future and trying to bring that content to the fore. And that now with kind of multiple digital channels, we're able to do that in a more exciting way. So I think that's the other bit that we'd love to bring is the positivity and the joy, but also to bring to life some of that beautiful kind of storytelling behind the products that I think will make them just so much more attractive to people.
There's a beautiful mindfulness, isn't there, in listening to what you guys are saying about bringing everyone back around a table, eating a meal together, breaking bread, talking about the food as we would have done. This is lovely. Where did it come from? You would have the conversation. Yet modern day life for many of us is rushing around, getting to your job, getting your kids to school or whatever it may be. There's a huge juggle that we're eating so much stuff on the hop, and we've been repeatedly told by marketing, have a grab and go bar, grab and go. And actually what we're really saying here is stop, slow down, enjoy it. Yeah. Stop grabbing and going. This is not the right thing to be doing. No,
100%. And just to the kind of joy point earlier, just really kind of struck a chord with me, because with us at Sapling, obviously we're talking about quite serious things when it comes to sustainability, client positivity. Quite often can be mixed in with existential threat of global warming and kind of the world coming to an end, all these things which you wouldn't typically associate with an alcohol and having a good time. Mm-hmm. And so it's so important that, like you're saying, you bring that story to the forefront, and it's about enjoyment, positivity, looking to the future and change without talking about kind of how bad everything is and the fact that you should be drinking less and you should be taking the bins out, should be flying, all these things which are really important, but you don't want to, it goes back to when the brand started, you don't want to turn people off from it, right? If we ask people just to come plant trees with us, they were like, what am I going to get out of there? It has to be enjoyment, it has to be fun, it has to the story has to come through. And actually when we first started working with Fortnum's, when we were trying to get a listing, we were about 8 months in and we were desperately on the phone to Oscar trying to get him to list Sapling. He was going, it's cool, but how are we going to bring the story to life? And so we ended up deciding to make a specific bottle for Fortnum's where we collected all of the citrus from 45 Jermyn Street downstairs over about 6 months. Doesn't sound actually that appetizing when I hear it back now. Froze it all.
What do you mean with citrus?
So when you make a gin and tonic, you'll have a lemon peel or an orange peel, whatever might be in it, and that gets thrown away. So essentially 90% of that's been wasted. It's been used for your nose and a bit of the fragrance, but actually no one's eating the lemon and so we collected all of that lemon and orange.
It's okay because it's posh, though.
Yeah, exactly. And we made a citrus vodka using the kind of what we've described as rescued fruit from the Fortnum's restaurant, and then launched it in the shop downstairs. So again, it was just kind of bringing the story of two brands together and how we could work together and all the rest of it. So fun stuff to kind of highlight sustainability without making people feel bad about their lives.
Is there ever a time that you've gone for something really rebellious and different that it hasn't worked out?
Loads. I'm trying to think about a specific kind of rebellious story that we've done. We've done loads that hasn't worked out.
Because this is the nature, isn't it, of a challenger brand, is you're testing and adjusting all the time and you're trying lots of things. So most people have got 4 or 5 different products they launched and then quietly just tucked away in a drawer after a while and just kind of carried on with the ones that work really well.
I think I don't know whether I should say this out loud on a kind of podcast or something like this, but
we can edit.
Something I'm
not going to edit.
We did was we thought we were a big part of one of our kind of key pillars is about innovation and packaging innovation, and we launched an aluminium miniature, recycled aluminium miniature, in partnership with Virgin Atlantic, and obviously they're a big brand, Virgin, and there's a whole PR thing about it, and we wanted to make a big song and dance about the launch, and we thought we were going to be the world's first aluminium miniature in aviation. We kind of put a whole press release out, and it turned out there was actually not an aluminium miniature in aviation. So that was a kind of rebel moment.
Did you get a cease and desist?
Luckily, they didn't actually have an issue with it, but I think we just realised after this had all kind of gone out that we were the second brand to do it, not the first. But it was all fine in the end. But yeah, that was a bit of a kind of a learning moment. Sure.
Well, I remember having a rebel on our show who is called Rob Bryce, who runs a company called Crave Snacks, and he was creating all these brands that were purposefully poking at Monster Munch, and I think he called them Monster Feet, and he had a whole raft of clearly ripping off kind of the big brands. And he was absolutely delighted, cock-a-hoop, when he came on the show. He goes, I've just had my first cease and desist letter. And that was what he was living for. He wanted this really rebellious moment where he was now in trouble. Of course, he had to back down, pull it off shelf, but he was like, this is it. PR-wise, go nuts. This is it. This is our moment.
Great PR, yeah.
I mean, I can imagine for Fortnum's, this is not really. I mean, how do you identify when you're kind of? And I know you're not a buyer per se, but when you're
not at all.
But when you're kind of choosing different brands to work with, how do you decide whether somebody's a genuine kind of rebel or a misfit, and where they've just got really good marketing?
Ooh, good question. I think the thing for us, and we've done a ton of collaborations, and we love doing collaborations and partnerships, but the thing is and you know, this is from Kate, our chairman, would always say, is it the best? Is it a brilliant product? And so if it's not a brilliant product, but they've got a great brand or they've got a great following, or that's not good enough. And I think it just comes down to just being, again, just really careful about, you know, who we will work with, not in a sort of snotty way, but in trying to find the products that really are the best in class, or that have that brilliant story, or that, you know, that as well as having a great purpose and a great story, also taste delicious. And I think that, you know, you could get seduced and chase novelty, and you could innovate the wrong way, trying to kind of chase after the sort of new sparkly thing. And I think that could be quite sort of seductive. But for us, it's about, does the product taste great? Is it a best in class? Does it have a fantastic story? And if you can answer yes to all of those things, then I think it makes it a little bit easier to sort of be able to divine which ones are the real genuine things that we want to do versus perhaps sort of something that looks beautiful and sparkly but actually isn't quite right.
Yeah, because taste is, at the end of all of it, taste is really why we choose different foods over other foods. I mean, yes, there's the health component as well. I saw your face there. I mean, lots of it's health, isn't it, when you're picking foods? And I know that for you, Laurie, you're very well informed across the kind of dietary spectrum of what children need and what humans need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Children are humans as well. I'm sorry, just to be clear.
But they are very tricky humans to make food for, as all of us will know. And especially making a children's product, they do not sugarcoat it if they don't like it. I think we've been lucky in that my other half, co-founder and head of manufacturing, husband, Charlie, is Captain Sensible, and everything.
Which order do they come in? Husband,
yeah, I know, I enjoyed that.
Depends on the day. Depends on the day. But he is so sensible. I think we've never released a product that he wasn't unbelievably happy with. But the children, on the other hand, have had to taste a lot of very, very odd things that they have not liked. And they're great because you kind of go like, taste this carrot jam that we're going to make. Mummy, I'm not having that. You're like, okay, fine. But yeah, no, health is super important. But for us, taste has to be number one for the children, and health is number one for the parents. And it's tricky because we're marketing kind of to two people at the same time and two kind of customer groups. So it's a tricky balance. We're always just looking for something that children love and parents love to give their children. And that's when we know we're on to a winner, because it can't be the wrong way around.
It can't be. No, it's a really difficult market, isn't it, where you're actually the person who's buying the product isn't ever going to be the person that really eats it. No. Although I do sometimes eat my kids'
It's
snacks.
definitely not just for children. But yeah, no, it's if the children won't eat it, then no one's buying it.
Amazing. Ivo, what advice would you give to aspiring rebel brands?
What advice I give to aspiring? I think that my probably main bit of advice would be, it's so easy to kind of talk about doing something and just put it off. And there's so many reasons to not start something. And again, I go back to when we were setting this up, we were 23, so it was really easy for us to just go out and do it because, like I said, we didn't have kind of kids and mortgages and all the rest of it. But I think the advice that I'd give anyone who's thinking about it is, rather than waiting until after the summer because you've got loads of summer plans, or waiting until after Christmas because your job, you might get a bonus, whatever it might be, just actually do it, and don't wait for a website developer to come and help. Just actually do it, basically.
Just go for it.
And don't procrastinate and put it off, because I see it all the time, and actually it's so much easier to start, make the mistakes and change than delay and wait for the perfect thing, and then you've missed your chance. And so I think just crack on and do it.
Yeah, because by the time it's perfect, it's kind of out of date by then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's build the plane in flight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we probably took that advice too hard, and made, and kind of like, we designed, our bottle was my flatmate designed it, never designed anything in his life, cost us £500. So it was all very much kind of bootstrapped, and it has meant that as the brand's grown and developed, we've probably spent more money on kind of re-engineering and making up for the mistakes around kind of like branding and product stuff than if we had spent probably 6 to 8 months or a year doing it in the first place. But I still think Sapling wouldn't exist today if we'd spent a year and a half, 2 years trying to figure out the tone of voice and exactly where it should be positioned and all those bits. We just thought, let's make 1,000 bottles, go out to market, understand from, and we went literally out to market, we went to a Christmas market, Blenheim Palace Christmas market, and spoke directly to as many people as we possibly could to gauge what they thought about the liquid, the story, all the rest of it, and went back and changed as much as we could. But that could have taken 2 years, and it took 6 months.
I think if you don't, as a founder, if you don't look back at your first go at your packaging and aren't incredibly embarrassed by it, you haven't done the right thing. I mean, we are going through a big rebrand at the moment. When we look back at sort of all the things we've done and even what we're doing now, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we ever put that out there. But I'm glad we did it and didn't wait.
Yeah, 100%.
You just have to go sometimes, don't you? Yeah. So same question to you. What would you say to somebody who's looking to really challenge the food and drink industry and launch a new brand? What advice would you give them?
I think you've got to be really, really passionate about it. It's got to be something that you are super passionate about, because if you don't really believe in it, really live and breathe it, no one else is going to. And especially when you're dealing with supermarket buyers and all of that, if they can't get that passion from you, then what's the point? And stick to your guns. As long as you have thought it through and you've got the margins there and everything kind of works. But just stick to your guns and just keep going. Because if it's a good idea and you're really passionate about it, you will get there. But nothing takes as long as like an overnight success. Yeah. And it's a roller coaster, or rather a white knuckle ride, I would say. But it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that point about if you don't believe in it, no one will, because you are going to repeat your USPs and your kind of party line so many times that you really have to believe that is a thing.
Yeah.
Liz, what can brands do if there are brands, wanting to kind of work with you here at Fortnum's? What can they do to really kind of stand out from the others?
I think, back to the storytelling, back to the kind of the great tasting product, and having a really clear insight about what they're solving for. So I think there's a really, for me, if you never lose sight of what customer problem or customer need that you're solving for, that's a really powerful thing. And I think people can get really fixated on the solution of, have we got the right solution? Should we tweak it? Actually, if you think about what's the customer problem that we're solving, there's a really clear kind of customer need or insight in both of the products that you've talked about today. Even though you kind of went at it and just tested into it and started doing things, I think, if you actually strip it back, there was a moment when there was a need there, and I think it's that thing about, have they established a product that fits fills a gap, and that's really exciting when you find a product like that there's a sort of a genuine need or a genuine desire for it, and so brands that have thought about that have got a product that is that comes from a great place, has a great story, and ultimately tastes delicious.
I'm going to put everyone on the spot now. Can you think of any brands off the top of your head that really kind of fit that kind of rebellious, your favourite rebel brands that have done a really good job?
I've always, for kind of all their sins as well, that I've always loved Oatly as a brand. I think just going into what has historically been a kind of commodity product like milk or oat milk, and really shaking up the market through just really amazing marketing, basically. And they've come under a lot of flack for various different reasons, but they recently, I think they set up a website specifically for everyone to write in all the reasons why they hate Oatly, and they're now pushing the reasons why everyone hates Oatly out to the world. And it's just kind of ingenious ideas like that. They're proper, in my head, a kind of rebel brand that are doing really interesting, cool things in what could be an incredibly boring space like oat milk.
Right, and there's lots of oat milk out there, so how do you stand out? You just have to have a different personality, don't you?
I was going to say, I love, and we know them quite well, but Bold Bean Co., who have taken beans in a jar and just changed the landscape of beans. I mean, it's amazing. But they have filled a gap. I mean, there's that kind of growing demand for pulses and things like that. But then again, when you look at some of the ones that are in tins, there's all sorts of like stabilizers and firming agents and things that you don't want, especially if you're wanting to move away from eating too much meat or things and you're moving towards pulses. But I think they've done that in an incredible way, made them sexy and glamorous, and it's beans in a glass jar. I mean, well done, and hats off to them.
Yeah, I mean, they are incredible, aren't they?
We did a bean vodka collaboration with them. Well.
Did you?
Quite fun. Yeah.
How did that taste?
It was good. It tasted good. I mean, vodka. Do you know, like tomato vodka pasta? Basically, it was a kind of a play on that, and it was delicious.
Yeah. Well, we did a collaboration with Get Baked last year, and I thought they were a really sensationally interesting brand. They've got a fantastic, just a completely passionate following. The product was absolutely delicious, and that, again, going back to my previous point, that was the thing that they did have this incredible marketing and this incredible following, but it was about, is the product really fantastic? And it's delicious. And I think the way that they go about their kind of their social platforms, they're just very, very inventive and innovating in a completely different way. So, yeah, I thought they were really interesting, very rebellious brand.
Brilliant. And what does the future look like? What do you think, Ivo? Where do you think
Future
we're
of
going?
Sapling
The
or
future
of
of food. Okay, finish this sentence.
Yeah.
The future of food should be...
Regenerative.
Nice. Laurie?
Clean.
Clean. What do you mean by clean?
Clean ingredients, clean processes, and sort of clean marketing as well. Just really honest.
So a bit more honest, a bit more transparent, a bit clearer.
Yeah.
Sustainable, smart. I'm trying to think of another S word. Local, not an S word, but sustainable, smart, and local. Shorter, better supply chains.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, a huge thank you to Ivo, Laurie and Liz. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for sharing so honestly and so passionately your story tonight. And thank you very much for the team at Fortnum & Mason for hosting us in this beautiful space. And to all of our audience for being here tonight. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Food Rebels, celebrating the stories behind the tastemakers, the change makers, and the brave rebels who make our food culture better. Until next time, keep questioning, keep tasting, and keep rebelling. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Food Rebels, which is available on radio stations around the UK and further afield. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Audible. Please remember to subscribe and rate us with 5 stars or follow us. It makes such a difference, not just to our podcast and radio show, but it really helps to support the guests that come on the show with us. We're also on Instagram at food_rebels. So give us a follow, do get in touch. We love hearing from you and let us know what you think. Thanks so much for joining us and make sure you taste the rebellion.